Good morning. Good morning. Sometimes it's, and we have enough people now that we'll get to the end and I was like, Ogyoku didn't say what, and I can't remember where we are. So that's a good sign. The Dharma's spreading. And I'm losing it a little bit. Those might be interrelated. So tonight begins the Rohatsu retreat that we hold each year at Buddha Eye Temple. And as I've been speaking about over the last few weeks, Rohatsu is the time of year. Let's get a little bit more light. I have a feeling I'm not going to be animated so much that I'll keep you awake in the dark. Could you just pop the, or Don, if you could get on that and just give us, just put those have little adjusters on them. The switches have little adjusters on the side. You can just put up, there we go, just a little bit more. Illumination, great. You can see your faces. I'll stay awake too. But the Rohatsu retreat is a retreat about the Buddha Shakyamuni's awakening. And the Buddha Shakyamuni was the Buddha who lived historically in our world 2,500 years ago in South Asia. And we refer to Shakyamuni Buddha as the Buddha who started the Dharma wheel turning in our world. Right? So Buddhism recognizes that there are many different worlds or different possibilities of different worlds. We don't have to think too hard about that, but if we just recognize that there's possibility of many different kinds of life. Right? But the Buddhism that we study is focused on the life that we have here as humans on this planet. And we were blessed to have the presence of a Buddha named Shakyamuni who took form here, lived out a human life, taught a dharma or a teaching for humans, and then passed into final nirvana, and continues to keep the dharma wheel rolling for this world until in the future, Buddhist legends tell us that another Buddha will arrive named Maitreya, who is the future Buddha, who's waiting now, if you're curious, in the Tushita heaven, which is the heaven of total contentment. Sounds like a nice place. Not sure why Maitreya wants to come down here, but we're told that this is because Buddhas are animated by the vow to awaken all beings. This is their central blood. And so contentment isn't really the orienting principle of Buddhist path or Buddhist life. Okay, that's not the orienting principle. What is salvation in Buddhism is an orientation with all beings to an overcoming of suffering and to the full potential of life. And in our case, that's a human life. At least those of you who are embodied here as humans. There's probably bunches we can't see and come in other forms. Like 1 year we had this turkey that showed up. He kept dive bombing the glass. He wanted to come in to practice so bad. I mean, really, this happens during Rohatsu often. One time we had this duck that was like have you seen these very ugly ducks? They have all these things growing off their face and they're different colors. Muscovy, and just wouldn't go. And then it was raining, like last night's kind of rain, and this duck was sitting on the roof of the temple. We're sitting here, we sit all day long basically, and I went out to my hut to go to bed at nighttime and looked up, and he's just sitting there. He was the best Zazen practitioner for the whole retreat. So I just say that to loosen us up a little bit, because we get so focused on the human condition, and that's appropriate because mostly we're humans. But there's a lot more play in the wheel than we might be inclined to give ourselves, give our hearts, and give our minds. So in this Rohatsu Sesshin, or in this week of Rohatsu, we're celebrating the awakening of the Shakyamuni Buddha. So until the Buddha awakened underneath the Bodhi Tree, we refer to him as the Bodhisattva, or the being of awakening, the being that's on the way to Buddhahood. And then after the awakening underneath the Bodhi Tree, then we begin to refer to Shakyamuni as the Buddha Shakyamuni. So this week, December 8th in Japan, in Japanese lineage Buddhism, is the day in which the Buddha's awakening is celebrated. So we always have this meditation retreat that is around that time. Now, most people in a Buddhist community will not take part in that retreat, and that's totally fine. That's not why I'm talking about this for a few weeks. The reason I'm talking about it is because whether you participate in that retreat or don't participate in that retreat, the same truth of the Buddha's awakening is exactly important to you in your life and the way your life is. If anybody's ever telling you that there's lesser and greater paths within the Buddha Dharma, don't listen to them. This path we call the Mahayana, the great path, or the great vehicle, not because it's greater than other vehicles, but because it's the vehicle in which all paths are included and all paths are celebrated. So the way in which you take up the celebration of the Buddha's awakening is about your particular causes and conditions, your particular where you are right now in your life, and what kind of sincerity can you bring to a deliberation about a life that is really full of living, is really the full potential of what you have to bring in this incarnation. And so for the first week, I talked quite a bit about relinquishment. Talked about the Buddha leaving the castle or leaving the palace. We don't really know from a historical perspective exactly what that looked like. Usually gets drawn up as being something like a Western fairy tale. Probably was more like a fort made of logs or something like that, you know. But that doesn't matter. What is your imagination? What does it mean to you in your imagination? That's the more important thing. The Buddha grew up there and had all the pleasures of a human life, and became very accomplished. He gave that up. He relinquished the protection of the palace. That's the way that I've been talking about it. The protection and the success. And then he went to study with the revered yoga teachers of his time, and he became very accomplished in their yogic systems. And when I say yoga, I don't mean body bending, okay? Although that was probably involved in one way or another, as it is here. But when we talk about yoga, yoga is just a way to talk about practices that unify with the ultimate. And so in a way, Buddhism has yoga practices, but they're oriented in a really different way than a lot of yogic practices. The yogic practices that he was studying at that time were helping him to create very rarefied states, very rarefied states of consciousness, which can be wonderful, but the Buddha didn't find the path there. And so he gave that up. He gave up the kind of conventional success of his time. He was destined to become a great unifying king of the whole region, and he probably would have been great. He would have been like the one you wanted to vote for, right? But he gave that up. Actually, this is an interesting fact. Historians tell us that the Shakyamuni, the Shakya clan, Shakyamuni means the sage of the Shakya clan, was probably democratic in some form. Not how our democracy is, maybe better, I don't know. But there wasn't just a hereditary monarchy, but that's the way that we would tend to think about it. Anyway, that's a little bit of a side note. But that's what he was destined for. He gave that up. He went for these rarefied states. Let me understand consciousness. Let me understand living in this most profound way. And he did. And he said it still wasn't what I was looking for. So he let it go. And then he tried to squish out all of the physical life from his body. There was a way of thinking that if you could just destroy all the problems of a life, a lot of them right here as your body, that then the internal spirit could emerge. And so he took up ascetic practices, and he did those diligently for 6 years until he was really almost dead. And then he gave those up. So these are all forms of relinquishment, a plan that he had for doing the spiritual thing that he thought he needed to do. All of them done earnestly, all of them done with real sincerity and vigor, but none of them really allowed him to find what he was looking for, or even to find the way that he wanted to look. And that's what I'm trying to talk about in these talks. He couldn't even, it's not that he just didn't find what he was looking for, he couldn't even find the way that he wanted to look for the thing that he was looking for. Until the great gift of a young woman named Sujata, who brought an offering to him in a golden bowl filled with milk, which she had collected from 1,000 cows. And boiled down into this milk of life, you know. It's like symbolic of everythingness right there in this one golden bowl, which she offers to the Buddha, who she mistakes for a tree spirit, that she has asked to bring her a child, and she has become pregnant. That's why she brings the offering. I love that detail. Not because I want to say that Sujata is like ignorant, but because Sujata is also following her earnest desire for the fullness of a human life. And that brings nourishment to the Buddha's quest. Not because she understands from some objective standpoint, like you're lecturing Sujata, you know, don't you know Sujata? This is the Buddha, not a tree spirit. How petty is that? You know, that's not the point. But we're doing that to ourselves all the time. You know, Sujata's right here inside of you, just wanting to nourish life, just wanting to draw the milk from the cows and to boil it down. And how many times do you bat her aside saying, oh no, you don't understand what this project is? Right? But actually she comes with the golden bowl, really unfailingly. And here, I would say, is the Buddha's really first awakening. He receives the bowl. Everything before that moment was articulated in some way through his self-clinging. Now, self-clinging is a pretty harsh word. It's what the sutras use. Okay? We might say self-centeredness, or just articulated through his own plan. Right? If you take up this practice, you'll become very familiar with your habit of doing that. It's not just that we take up this practice to destroy that. We actually take up this practice to become very familiar with our incessant habit of articulating everything through our own self-position. It's very natural for us. It helps us survive in an isolated way. It doesn't help us flourish. And so at this moment, the receiving, something about the wholeness of being that is offered as nourishment to the Buddha changes his way of seeing. And now he has this possibility of looking in a different way. Relinquishment, not that's just articulated through the project of whatever his spiritual idea of who he is or what he wants to do, but now he can walk having received as well as relinquished. And this is really what our study is, and what this story of the Buddha's awakening, what was the quality of his navigation. We come back to this year after year after year around this time. How did the Buddha find the Bodhi tree? If he had just searched in the original way, just pushing forward. No, first off, if he didn't look, which that's a lot of our spiritual malady, right? We just don't look. And a lot of times we don't look because we don't think we're good enough. That's not for me. Oh, there's that guy in the brown robes who sits up in front and talks and carries that stick. He's a real spiritual person. I'm not a spiritual person. Or whatever, whatever you tell yourself. That's the first mistake we make, right? And that's not the case. The Buddha lived countless lifetimes before being incarnated in this world, sometimes like as a cockroach. Right? And the legends about those lives are wonderful because in every story, the legend is about, okay, cockroach this time, what do I do? What's a cockroach dharma, right? And then there's a story about, like, okay, how do I fulfill the earnestness of this path in the conditions that I'm in? Right? Not to call you a cockroach, sorry. Just saying, even that. So that's the first way. But then the second way is we march around with our plan, right? And then we march around with our plan, and you can never find the tree. I'd mentioned last time that the Tree of Awakening was very close to where the Buddha grew up. If you look at the map, where Bodh Gaya is very close to where the Buddha, he could have walked there in a couple of days, and he was walking around all over the place as an ascetic and as a wandering shramana, as a seeker, right? But never found it. Right? The tree was very quiet until this point. A different way of navigating appears with this realization that as I let go, I also receive. And in the receiving, there's a new navigation that's possible, not one that's me just denying my own inspiration or my own sense of something needed to be done, but also isn't just a marching forward with my plan to conquer the world through my spiritual gusto, whatever it is that looks like. Most people fall more on one side or the other. I'm definitely the second side. I'm the gusto type. Lots of monks are, and we have to kind of get the crap beat out of us a lot, to get to the place where we're like, oh, and one of the ways is we have to receive. We're forced to live through receiving. All of us are, actually. So I want to say this kind of navigation that I'm talking about is not complicated. It's not complicated. Right? There's a lot of Buddhist teachings that sound very, very complicated. Those teachings are important, but this teaching is not complicated. Zen Buddhism that this temple belongs to, Uchiyama Roshi is his name. He coined a phrase called opening the hand of thought. He has a book by that title, Opening the Hand of Thought. And oftentimes a great teacher like Uchiyama Roshi will coin a phrase. I figure they just get sick of teaching. And pretty soon they're like, could I just have a phrase? And I could go back to it again and again and again and again. And just give me a little more time. Your life might be easier. But for Uchiyama Roshi, he called this opening the hand of thought. And I love this phrase. It's simple, but not easy to come back to again and again and again. What Uchiyama Roshi says is we think that we're holding on to thoughts. He said that's not quite right. We're not holding on to thoughts. Our holding on is thoughts. Okay? So the closedness of the fist is not that there's a thought and that we're holding on to it with something, but it is consciousness which has fixed on itself. It has fixed on an object. It has split into a subject-object relationship, and it has done this. Not a bad thing. Right? You want to cook your oatmeal in the morning? You better have that capacity. If the hand only stays open, it doesn't function. Right? But the issue is we start to focus only on the closing of the hand. And when we focus only on the closing of the hand, that's called grasping, and a suffering starts to emerge from that. So this principle of relinquishment and receiving, relinquishment it's not just our project. Relinquishment is like batting things away. It's like using our hand to try to get rid of things. It's like empty it out, empty it out, empty it out. And here, opening the hand of thought is saying, no. Just feel your mind, feel your heart, feel the clenching, and do that. That is not a complicated thing. But it takes a lot of staying present because there's no such thing as forcing it open. You can't force it open. You have to let it open. But it's you. So what does it mean to let yourself do something? This is a great koan of meditation. You've got to show up. There is a kind of doing, but it's not the kind of doing of getting rid of or getting. It's a kind of doing of receiving and letting go. This principle is active in all kind of endeavors in different ways. I would say that many people who come to meditation in the West in general, I don't know if you guys know this. Did you know that most Buddhists don't meditate? I'd like to just pop that in every once in a while because I want you to meditate. I believe in meditation. I believe Zazen is a profound orienting principle for life. But we have, in the North America, we have such a propensity to take anything and turn it into a flogging stick. Like it's just, we get so deep that I feel like this is happening with meditation. One of the sublime things. It would be like if you took love and you said, what's wrong with me? I don't have love. I need to get love. Which we do that too, right? But like you're flogging yourself with love or art or music. What would be the point? Right? Meditation is the same thing. It's not a flogging stick, right? It's not to hurt yourself. It's actually an invitation to something. And so anyway, I just feel like I should say that. Awareness, concentration, mindfulness. These are the kind of things that many of us come to Buddhist practice hearing about, being interested in, knowing that there's a medicine there, right? Just like the Buddha who felt there's something else. There's some other way of navigating. There's some other way of living. There's some other way of being. and he was looking for a way through. We are all the same. If you're here, it means you have that in some way, even if you were dragged here by someone. Right? You have that a little bit. Don't look at her. You have that a little bit, right? Everybody does. And so in that place, how do we bring that to meditation? How do we bring that to life? How do we bring that to practice? Right? That becomes the question. And oftentimes the neon sign for us, at least where we are in our causes and conditions right now, are things like mindfulness or concentration or mental hygiene, mental health, those kinds of things. All really, really important. Right? This principle is involved in those things. But oftentimes in that endeavor, we forget the receiving. We just think it's about some doing, like I'm supposed to get rid of my thoughts. I'm supposed to relinquish my upset. And then meditation becomes a very small circle of kind of self-criticism, right? And the people who are kind of talented at the meditative exercise become very proud because you get good at criticizing yourself, right? And you get good at kind of rising above something, right? That's not the point. You're much better off to be a little bit less talented at that process and have to find another way. Because the other way is, the rain. You can hear it, right? When you let go of some other thought. The incessant turning. You let go and then you hear this beautiful sound of our living here in this green valley. Oftentimes in the sutras when it says that there was celestial drumming, this is oftentimes the case when the Buddha is going to preach, that the divinities will bring forth this music. And I always think of that this time of year. You know, we just live right in the middle of that, the divine song of rain. And then I woke up this morning, there's a leak in my kitchen. Don't wax too poetic. Okay. So this is the quality. Now, there's a further point though, and that is that this practice of meditation is not just to experience peace of mind. Okay, it's not just to experience that celestial music. It's not really to experience anything. It's not even to learn to accept. That's a big kind of a story these days, right? If I could just accept things, then it'd be okay. This is kind of a little bit of a nihilistic fantasy. Like, if I could just like clear the decks, if everything could not matter, I would be okay. That's almost what that means. Now, I'm not saying acceptance is bad. I'm just saying that when we hyper focus on acceptance and we're in that place where like, I just need to accept, we might be undercutting our inspiration to do something else and just telling ourselves I should accept the situation. Okay? The Buddha pushing forward with his plan didn't work. Giving up everything, trying to crush life didn't work. He had to find a different way to navigate. And the different way to navigate also was not, let me just sit and see if I can accept everything. Because what was there too was his own sense of, I need to find the path. I need to find the path. So the sitting is not just to give us acceptance, although it gives us that in some measure, so that we can find the fundamental. We can find out what is really driving us. What do I really care about? Where are my feet going to take me? Okay? And that's a part of the story that I think is so important. The Buddha didn't stop after receiving the nourishment from Sujata. In fact, he gave a great resolve. He said, I'm really going to do this. And the next part of the legend, I'll kind of go short about it, but it's very beautiful. He turns and he looks, where should I go? Where should I practice? What should I do? And he sees a mountain there off in the distance, which is referred to as Bodhi Mountain, which means pre-enlightenment mountain. I think it was named after this. And think about that. When you really give resolve, to practice, what's in your vision? It's different for everyone, but I think for many people, a stable, lofty, serene, beautiful mountain, that's pretty good, right? That draws your heart. And the mountains are God's. And they're telling us there's another possibility. We're so fortunate here to be able to see mountains like that, but then I think we forget very easily. So, oh yeah, there's the sisters. It's like, in a way, you shouldn't even be able to say those names, right? You should just like kind of choke on your own, what would be the word? Like arrogance to utter their names, So beautiful. So beautiful. Right? So that's what the Buddha sees. And so he travels there and he climbs up to the top of the mountain. And as he gets to the top of the mountain, and he can see out over everything. Just feel what that would feel like, right? Like you're looking out over the whole world, and you're this spiritual being of unbelievable energy. And just as he's there, yes, this is the place. I can just feel it in my body. Can you feel it? Like, yes, this is the place. And a spirit comes down from the heavens and says, please, do not be awakened here. If you are awakened here, the mountain will crumble and everything will be destroyed. I think this is one of the most important teachings in Buddhism, after Sujata. Right? It's not the high place. It's not the place in which you see everything. That's not the center. That's not the pivot point of the Buddha's journey. Right? And the divinity knows that if he is awakened there, he can be, but then everything has to be destroyed. The vast, broad view becomes the supreme. And every little particular is just a piece on the board, right? So the Buddha understood that. He said, okay. And he descended the mountain. And as he's descending the mountain, there's a cave in the side of the mountain. And so he enters into the cave, and there's a giant serpent that lives there that's known as a Naga in Asian religious traditions. And the Nagas are keepers of deep wisdom. They live deep in caves or in the water. They're a symbol of deep mind, right? Of the unconscious, maybe we could say. And so he goes deep into this cave, and the Naga asks him, oh, please be awakened here and teach me. And wow, I can feel that one too. It's a little different than this one, but it's the like, all my how many thousands of pages of journaling and dream recording and every kind of introspective thing, which is wonderful, right? But there's also something there, and the spirit arrives again and says, no, this isn't the place. And the Buddha realizes that's true. And the spirit says, if you want to find the way, you should go back to the jungle, down by the river where you were practicing before. And the spirit sends him back to where he came from, in the jungle. Think how gnarly it would be to, showing my age there, Gen X, if any of us are Gen Xers, how gnarly it would be to sit in meditation in the jungle. Like, you think we got bugs here? Right? And I think how nice the top of the mountain or even the cave would be compared to all the bugs that are going to climb on you when you're, sitting in your skivvies out in the out underneath a tree in the jungle. Mm-hmm. I'm joking about that, but I'm also, it's like really, he sends them back to the teeming life, right? Like the rainforest of inconvenience. And the Buddha sees this as true, and so he's leaving the cave, and the Naga begs him to stay. And any of you who have been in the Naga cave, when you know that it's time that you need to go, the Naga will beg you. The Naga will say, don't go, because the Naga has a deep wisdom. The Naga knows that if you leave the cave, you're going to forget about this whole part of being, which is so easily forgotten. And again, wonderful part of the story. The Buddha says, don't worry, I will leave my shadow here to teach you. And so the Buddha leaves his shadow in the cave and then travels down along the river and then comes to the tree. And when he's coming to the tree, first there's a young grass cutter who gives him I don't know, there must be a word for that, like a bundle of grass, right? We don't really have grass cutters now, and we have lawnmowers, but we don't have grass cutters. At that time, cutting grass was like a poor person's way of making money, because grass was used for all kinds of things, bedding, for example. And so this grass cutter has this. This is important to him, and he gives it to the Buddha. He knows that the Buddha can use it. The Buddha receives, and then he approaches the tree. And when he approaches the tree, he comes to the tree from the south. And it's said that as he walks close to the tree, the whole southern quarter of the cosmos, that's a big word, okay, dips down. It's like the tree is here in the middle. The sutras say that it's like a wheel with a hub laying on its side. So the tree is there in the center. And as the Buddha is here, everything tips down, and the north side lifts all the way up into the heavens, and the Buddha side sinks all the way down into the deep hells. And so the Buddha starts to walk around the tree in a clockwise fashion, because that's the correct direction. And as he walks, the wheel turns on the hub like this. It's a beautiful image. And think about that in your own journey. What is it when you get to the place where there's something that won't leave you alone? You know it's at the center, but you can't quite go to it. But you know it's the center because the whole cosmos rocks and turns and bends as you walk around this thing, and you try to encounter it, but you don't know how. Right? And so the Buddha's walking around, and the whole thing's turning until he comes to the east side, the side where the light emerges. And then it's said that the wheel doesn't move. And the Buddha takes the straw and he throws it down, and a diamond seat appears. Diamond is a symbol for immovability. And then the Buddha turns and he steps back down onto that diamond seat. And that's where he finds the path. That's where he finds the stability to encounter ignorance, to encounter delusion in the completely direct way of upright sitting. Now that kind of navigation, this is the Buddhist story, and we can learn all about different things from hearing the way that was the Buddhist story, but our story has to unfold there too. I don't know that a mountain will appear to you, as you say, oh, I want to give rise to a great resolve, a great spiritual resolve. And I want to relinquish this protection and this accomplishing and this destroying. And I want to learn, I want to base my life in the receiving that comes when I let go of that protection, when I let go of that kind of destruction and that kind of personal accomplishment, and meet the circumstances that are there. And when I do that, how do I live? In that navigation, when you're asking yourself that question, what will appear will be what will appear to you. But we can learn here from the Buddha's teaching. There will be heights. There will be depths. There will be returning back to your life. There'll be feeling for that place that doesn't move, and yet as you walk around it, everything moves. Now this kind of process, these kinds of processes, we can think of as being like a circle. Right? They happen over and over again, but maybe it's better even to think of them as a spiral, because there's some movement, it's just not happening on the plane of the circle. Right? So it looks like you're doing the same thing again and again and again and again and again, which can be frustrating. It's called cyclic existence. It's not satisfying, but it's important because really there is some movement that's happening there. Now, for those of you who attend the Rohatsu sitting this week, which Some people will be here for the whole week sitting. If you like, you can come in the mornings for sitting or in the evenings for sitting without signing up, and I'm sure there'll be an announcement about that after the talk if you're interested in that. But there'll be more teachings about how this circle unfolds within meditation, or particularly within a retreat kind of setting. But I want to talk about the circle in a little bit broader sense. The reason that Buddha's enlightenment story, I think, is so important for us to come back to is it helps us to reorient. You know, we enact Rohatsu again and again and again each year, and we do that for the purposes of orienting, for finding, not like how do I align myself with some externally determined way that I'm supposed to be. I don't mean that kind of orienting, but I mean finding the star of your own heart. Remember, the Buddha woke up upon seeing the morning star, seeing a morning star. We usually say the morning star. English is kind of a pain that way. The morning star or a morning star. In this case, I would say, what is your morning star? That's something for you to find again and again and again and again and again and again. And so when we come back to Rohatsu, this circle is asking us to do that, again, in the way that is appropriate for us in the time and place that we are. A number of years ago, I was visiting Great Vow Zen Monastery in Klatskanai, Oregon, which I imagine most of you don't know where Klatskanai is. It's like if you're going to go from Portland to Astoria, it's kind of halfway there. Beautiful monastery. The co-abbots there, Chozen and Hogen Roshi, very, very kind to me when I came back from Japan, and sort of were some of the instrumental teachers in saving me from myself and helping me find my way here in the United States. And so I like to visit there when I can. I haven't for some time now, but I don't remember how long ago. It was maybe a dozen years or so. I was visiting for something, and we were having breakfast together. And for those of you who know Hogen Roshi in particular, you'll identify with the situation. After breakfast is over and people putting their bowls away and everything like that, it's just without anything ahead of time saying anything to me, he says, "So Ejo, now you will take questions from the assembly." He said, "First, why don't you tell us what you think the absolutely most important thing in practice is?" And I was holding my bowls. I was like, going to the bathroom? That's what I felt. But, so it's a great moment. And one of Hogen Roshi's really great qualities is he just doesn't do a lot of the social convention stuff. He's just like, we're here for Dharma. There's no niceties need to be around this thing. Just go straight to the thing. First time I had dinner with him, it was the first time I met him. We sat down to have dinner. I'd met him in San Francisco at a meeting. He sat down, he said, "What is the fire in your teacher's mouth?" I don't know what you're saying. And then he explained to me what he was saying, and then I sloughed it off, and he realized I wasn't ready for such a important conversation. So anyway, we're at this. That's a big build-up to something totally different. But anyway, one of the monks there asked me this question because I had been saying I don't think that monastic practice can be defined as the most important thing in Buddhist practice. I really believe that. But if you're practicing like the monks do at a Great Vow Zen Monastery day to day, it's probably better to believe that is the most important thing, because it's hard. It's really hard. Just like doing this Rohatsu session is really hard. It's not easy, right? And so people doing this kind of arduous practice, and it's easy to believe that's what's most important. And I was kind of saying, I don't think that's what's most important. And so one of the head monks at that time said, "Well, okay, Ejo, then what do you think is the most important thing?" And I don't know why this story came to me to kind of end this talk with, but what I said at that time I still believe, and that is earnestness. And I don't mean just being like a shiny young boy kind of, I want the ice cream so bad. I don't mean that kind of earnestness. But I mean the kind, although maybe I do mean that kind of earnestness. The sincerity of a heart that says, what is this? What do I want? What do I believe in? And then to take a step where we let go of all of the ways that I might try to fortify that, or I might try to get it for myself, or I might try to destroy it because it's inconvenient to trust it too much, right? And to meet the world, to receive the world. That earnestness every single one of us has. It is fundamental to our consciousness, and we really yearn to express it as our life. And so when I say orientation, that's what I'm talking about. And nobody can tell you what that should look like. You can't even tell you what that should look like, right? I don't mean to say you should make it up, right? And then that's what's true. I mean, you can't even know what it should look like. You have to live it, not take a photo of it or draw it or map it out. And that living it is what the Buddha's life in this quest really is a kind of gift to us. And if we're not going to live that earnestness out now, then when are we going to? Is there any questions or comments?
I missed the last few words that you said.
If we're not going to do it now, then when will we? Yeah.
If we move toward our earnestness, so we think, and we step on something or kill something inadvertently, and it breaks our heart.
Yeah.
Is it offering that we would do to, or requesting forgiveness, all of the above,
Yeah. Atonement is the term that we usually use.
That was the one I was
Yeah, atonement. So if you think about the origins of that word in English, atonement, it means at one-ment.
Mm-hmm.
You could take it apart that way. I don't know etymologically exactly how that holds up or not, but it's a good device that to become one with something. You said if we go towards our earnestness, I would say that we're not going towards our earnestness, we're living through earnestness, right? And in that, there are guaranteed to be problems, mistakes. We will hurt other beings in many, many, many different ways. It's impossible not to do that. And in the Buddha's teaching, we see that happening too. I mean, he hurt his father, he hurt his wife and his son in the leaving, he hurt his horse, he hurt his servants, he hurt his whole community, he hurt the teachers that he left, he hurt his ascetics, comrades that were relying on him to uphold their practice together. He hurt himself. This is happening over and over and over and over again. And so the requirement for the path is not that we don't hurt anything, including ourselves, but it's that we stay receptive, that in the receiving of the pain, both caused by us and caused by other things, that we have a capacity to let it be whole. And letting it be whole, again, this is a really tricky point, is not the kind of acceptance where we say, now I'm off the hook, but it's the kind of acceptance where we're on the hook. You can see the difference? Like when you can accept that you've done something to hurt someone, and you confront the actuality of the remorse, not try to get off the hook of the remorse by telling yourself a story of acceptance. That's atonement. And it's why most people don't come to the atonement ceremony. It's too challenging. Like mostly we don't want to do that. We don't want to face the actuality of our living and the pain that it causes. Much better to, chill out a little bit. And I get that. We should probably chill out a lot before we take that one on too. too directly. So so in that it's a great challenge, and it's also a great relief. And it's not a solution. It's not a solution to the difficulty of having caused pain. And I think that's the thing that's really the key point in what atonement is about. We're not exiting the problem, but we do become whole. Or in Buddhist terminology, we become pure. And pure means that we're not trying to get off the hook.
And then living with the remorse, and is that being on the hook in a sense?
Well, in a way, but if we just fetishize the emotional difficulty of it, then that's not really facing it either. It's like this central point. It's like the tree here for the Buddha in a way. It's like a thing that won't move, right? And as we try to walk around it, the whole world rocks and tilts. And when we find something like that, we know that there's a pathway right in the middle of it. And so we got to stay with it until we can find that path. And that will include a lot of remorse, but keep walking. Don't let the remorse be a reason to stop the walking and the searching, because then you don't find the path. Hi.
How do we differentiate from the voice of the angel that tells us not here, move on, make a different decision, and what might feel closer to a voice of doubt and fear?
Yeah. So the question was the difference between doubt and fear and a voice that's guiding you to not do the thing there, but to move on somewhere else. So I would direct you back again to wholeness. That if the correctness that you feel about the voice is one that cleaves things into two and asks you to take one over the other, you're just in wobbly territory. Right? That actually, when you make a decision this direction, that's really that voice of direction, it won't ask you to destroy the other side. But it still asks you to make a choice. Right? And that choice, a real choice, doesn't kill the other side. A real choice says, I will return to the jungle, and I know that the naga and the mountain are beautiful and important. And I'm not going to try to make the whole world, I'm not going to try to define what is best or worst or true or untrue in the whole world for the purposes of making my decision. I'm going to take the responsibility of the navigation of this step. And that's my responsibility to do. And I don't have to cut the world in two. I can make the choice. So that's what we're listening for. And oftentimes we've got to spend a lot of time with the doubt side and listen to it. But listen to its delusion as well as its wisdom until that voice transforms into something more reliable. Probably time for one more if anyone's got anything burning. Otherwise, we'll.
Just one.
Hi.
Lately, I'm finding myself just for various life circumstances, just having a lot of frustration, and a strange thing that I'm not used to. I'm like, I can't sit through it, which is something I got really good at doing for many years, and now I can't. I have to get up and do something, and I can't.
Congratulations! I know that's not what you want to hear. That's not exactly what your question is, but I want to highlight like that. Getting to the end of your rope is like a gift, because especially when we're accomplished, and you've practiced for decades now. And you know how to work with a lot, different emotions and stuff like that. And that's all, again, it's all great. But you get to that edge, and then you actually have to say, oh, I have to give that up. I have to give up the yoga. I have to give up the accomplishment. I have to give up the fortification in all the ways that I have perfected it. Even though it's good, it's still just good. You know, famous statement of Bodhidharma, it's better to have nothing than to have something good, which is really, we don't have to go into that too much right now. But it's actually true that the good things wear out. They can't be true in all circumstances. They can't work. And so, but there is this this vessel at the center. In the case of the Buddha's awakening, it's the tree, which roots are deep down in and up above, which we have to explore. And the exploring is not only on the east side with the stability of the seat, but it's also all the churning that happens in the other places, which mostly we can kind of like avoid by trying to go directly to the stability of the seat. And so I would say really it's difficult, and I don't mean to make light of it, to savor the quality of that frustration, and then you can work with yourself in a way that you never have before, because you're right on the edge of it, rather than kind of knowing what to do with it, or at least saying, well, I got a toolbox here. And that part of the journey really draws you to something that you can't get drawn to any other way. And that's why I think sometimes people are, find Buddhism a little morose, because we seem to revel in this like really challenging things. But it's not. It's because that's where joy is. Like if you think about when you really face the edge of difficulty, that's also where this wellspring of joy is the most liberated. And then success is not about your domination of the world. Success is about, wow, good relationship, for example. And I know you're a father right now, and you're at one of the really challenging stages of fatherhood when you got a couple kids and they're getting to the age of and in your professional work and everything, that all comes together at one time, and so it could just be like a huge amount. But that's all that rocking around the tree, and there's this other thing that you're birthing. And I was saying it to my wife the other day. She, you gotta give her credit. You guys listen to me for an hour or something on a Sunday morning. I'm saying things to her all the time, and she's just like, yes, honey. And the other day I said, it takes 20 years to get 20 years of experience. No matter how much you do, for those 20 years, it's still just 20 years of experience. And I went on like that, really animated for a while, and she was like, yes, honey. But I had a point, and that is, and so now I can share it with you. The point is, there's no way to become who you will be until you do all the things that you become. And we want to short circuit that, right? That's part of our thing. Is try to get there a little quicker. And you're right, when you're right in the pressure cooker of it, we'll wait till middle school. Then,
If I may,
Yes,
just
yeah.
one more. How do you, in that place where things are just, you're feeling really overburdened and there's just not enough resources to meet all the demands.
Yeah.
Having trouble navigating at the seat of that earnestness and moving forward in this place of sincerity that meets the moment that you know is going to fall short.
Yep.
And you also know you just need to lay on the couch and watch Netflix tonight because that's the only thing. And I'm really sometimes actually I just do need to relax and watch some Netflix. And I guess there's no right answer to this question.
Yeah.
My question is how do you navigate those that? When am I just avoiding? When is it avoidance? When is it meeting the scenario?
So I say two sides. One side, it is really important to study that. When am I just avoiding, and to get clear about that. So that side, and you've done a lot of that. And so I'm just going to put that aside a little bit. So, but for everybody, that is really important. And if we don't understand that, a lot of times we just pick Netflix, right? Because why not, right? Although sometimes it's not that great, but we do that so easily. So we should watch that. We really should watch that. But on this other side, I would say one of the things that you're learning, and I think is very difficult for many of us to learn, is you will not be enough. You won't. And when you live with a kind of fullness in which you're dedicating your life to things that you care about, not least of which definitely is your family, not being enough is one of the most painful things. And not being enough means you get to actually be in a family. You get to actually be in a community. You get to actually be in a world. Because when you're enough, it's just like being on the top of the mountain. And so the not enoughness is actually vitally important. And I think this is also, we hear this echoed in the story of the Buddha receiving from Sujata the nourishment. And how hard that receiving of the nourishment is. You know, if Sujata came to our door with a golden bowl and milk, you know, we'd probably turn Netflix off, right? But what is that? We can't even exactly say what's the nourishment that we need. But we can realize that we need to meet a world and not be everything.